Crossed into the net by Kylian Mbappe.
Oh, Benyera, beautifully done.
Cornet finds Dembele. The first touch is good. The second is deadly.
Neymar still. Oh, my word, what a goal.
Golovin. Lovely finish. Ajax delivery. Guendouzi's header.
Here's an opportunity. Sanchez.
Outrageous goal from Gael Kakuta. Payet again. And Dolberg. Messi again. This time maybe Messi's done it.
Hello everyone and welcome to the latest episode of Le Beau Jeu, the official Ligue 1 podcast with myself, Robbie Thompson, back in the host seat after missing the first two since the World Cup. But it is great to be back, and even though there wasn't any Ligue 1 football over the weekend, we're going to sink our teeth deep into the Coupe de France because it was the round of 64, or as the French like to confusingly call it, the round of 32 matches that took place on the weekend. It was the introduction of the Ligue 1 teams into the draw, and for all the action and to get involved with us and get involved with the conversation as well, don't forget to check out our Twitter, Ligue 1 World, Ligue 1 _English. There's the website, ligue1.com, and of course, get involved with us. Send us and myself, Robbie Thompson, and our guests, our experts, our commentators, any questions you like about French football, French culture, to ligue1podcast@gmail.com. We've got plenty coming up. We've got the Coupe de France. We've got the Deja Who with your chance to win a Ligue 1 jersey as well. We're also going to talk a little bit about transfers and look ahead to two full rounds of matches of Ligue 1 on this week, where the president of the French Football Federation, Noël Le Graët, announced on radio in an interview, having just re-signed Didier Deschamps as coach of Les Bleus for another 3 years, that if Zinedine Zidane telephoned him, he wouldn't even bother picking up the phone. I'm very pleased to say that two gentlemen that did answer the phone when I called, Andy Scott and Ian Holyman, have joined us for this one. Gentlemen, it's all sorts of trouble at the FFF. We can't beat around the bush. Kylian Mbappe's come out and said, how can you talk like this? And I've only got glowing things to say about the two of you. So thank you for joining us.
Pleasure. You're welcome. I had nothing better to do, Robbie, to be honest. So I just need to fill the time before I get a train.
Perfect. Well, we'll make sure you don't miss that train. Andy, how was your French Cup weekend?
Yeah, it was good, thanks, Robbie. Yeah, I mean, you were talking to us before about going on 20-kilometre walks along the Australian coast. I can say that Bondoufle in the Paris suburbs, where I was on Saturday watching Lens, could not be more different. I might as well have been on a different planet. It was great. It was wet. It was windy, and it was not particularly scenic, but it was good fun all the same.
Well, it's always nice here when
I was just going to say, if I'd been wearing roller skates in Lyon, I could have just stood there and been driven by the wind for across 20 kilometres because it was so cold.
Well, look, I can't just say that the weather's been like paradise here. We've had an awful lot of rain, as we have had over the last year and a half. And there's something nice about waking up early on a weekend morning and flicking on the computer and seeing the Coupe de France action from the other side of the world, and knowing that you're going to have a beautiful day ahead of you to look forward to.
The thing is, Robbie, that I know Ian made a joke on last week's podcast, which I listened to on my walk from Orange's Bois de l'Épine RER station to the stadium in Bondoufle, and he made a joke about about this being the official Ligue 1 weather channel, and so I don't want to linger too long on the weather, but it is worth pointing out that it's not actually been as cold this year as it usually is at the beginning of January. It's been unseasonably mild in France. In fact, it was 16 degrees on New Year's Eve. It was wonderful, albeit, if you leave aside all concerns about climate change. But for some reason, even with it being relatively mild for the time of year, in the stadium in Bondoufle in the Paris suburbs where I was on Saturday, it was still absolutely freezing. I don't know how that could be the case. As soon as I left the stadium, it was okay. But just up on the gantry, it was so cold. So cold. Goodness me.
Yeah, I was going to say, Andy, that's a fair point. This may conjure up a mental image that you may want to remove and may not be able to. But I didn't even have to wear long johns in Lyon. I mean, that was...
Well, that's not right. That's not right. Round of 64s, from my memory, are always long johns and thermal underwear and running up and down. Like you said, Ian, I've done that as well, running up and down the stadium stairs at halftime and before the game to try and get your heart beating.
I mean, I've told the story to Ian just the other day, so I apologise for repeating myself to Ian, but not a last 64 cup tie, but a few years ago I was in Nantes for a quarter-final cup tie between Les Herbiers, the third division team who got to the final in 2018. We're playing Lens in the quarter-final in February, and it was absolutely freezing. It was a 0-0 draw after extra time. It went to penalties. It was so cold that my bottle of water, which the production team had very helpfully given me, froze. It was sitting there next to me, and the bottle of water froze. It was so cold, and it was so difficult to get through that evening. No goals, all the way to extra time and penalties, and I will never forget that. So I don't think anything will top that. But there's something about the charm of the Coupe de France where it is just always cold.
People don't appreciate just how hard it is to commentate football matches, and our job, traveling around the French countryside, and another thing I will add, because we talk about Bondoufle and Les Herbiers, the Coupe de France, the French Cup is, and I was having a look at the stats earlier because we had our Australian Cup at the start of the season here, and I was looking at the number of teams that enter the Australian Cup, because here we say it's the cup that unites the pyramid because we have a closed league. There's no promotion relegation from the A League, the first division. So this cup competition is a chance for outside of the A League to mix it with the top strata, if you like. And so I went into it to have a look. So to start with Australia Cup, 750 teams enter the Australian Cup, so full amateur clubs. The English FA Cup, 730 or 732 clubs enter the FA Cup, this famous FA Cup where, all the upsets and magic of the cup. In France, this season, 8,506, more than 12 times as many clubs as enter the FA Cup. And that's how you get a Linas Montlhéry, you get a Les Herbiers. We've got some amazing results that we had over the weekend for clubs that have made it this far. There's a chance that there will be a sixth division team playing against Paris Saint-Germain on the weekend of the 21st, 22nd. If that happens, Le Puy de Cassis, I think it was, or some tiny regional team, which really would be not even part-timers, just pure amateurs. Literally the local football team could be taking on Paris Saint-Germain in the round of 32. I mean, that is spectacular. And if you look at others, in Italy, the Coppa Italia that we see and hear so much about every year, 44 teams take part in the Coppa Italia. 120 in Spain, 126 in Germany, 64. So the French Cup, if there's ever going to be a cup that you want to talk about that embodies the beauty of football and the part-timers, the minnows with the chance to go all the way, this really is that competition. So there you go, gentlemen. Any comment about that?
I was just going to say I wholeheartedly agree. It's a point I made in the commentary during my Lyon Mets game on Saturday. It's just incredible the number of shock results, the number of lower league teams, and not even lower league. I mean, they're almost off the scale. 4th division, 5th division, 6th division, as you said, who come through and get into the later stages of the competition, get into the final. I was mentioning it because Rouen, who were in the 3rd division, who were up just not far away from where I live, made the final in 2012. I mean, as Andy said, Les Herbiers, who got to the final. I mean, you're talking, it's pretty much village teams getting to the Coupe de France final. It's incredible.
Absolutely. It is unbelievable how often it happens as well. I think Calais were one of the first, but we've had 2nd division, we've had 3rd division sides all the time in the final. We had 6 more Ligue 1 clubs bundled out at the round of 64. Here, there were some huge upsets. Montpellier are gone. Clermont lost to, and this is another interesting thing about French football, just very quickly. We'll go through the results more or less, but FC Olympique Strasbourg, Königshofen, 1906. Now, in France, you like to reduce the names of a club to just the initials, like Lille Olympic Sporting Club is just LOSC, LOSC, PSG for Paris Saint-Germain, OM and OL. I mean, that's how they are known in France, as l'OM and l'OL. So this one is FCOSK 06. which is a spectacular. Stitch that into your logo. It's basically a full name.
What's interesting is that Strasbourg went out on Friday, a game that I commentated on penalties to Angers. So a big thing for Angers in terms of their confidence boost. And Metz went out to Lyon earlier on Saturday. So I think it's 5th division. The 5th division side, FKOSK,
yep.
06. They're the only side from the region still left in the competition.
Incredible result. They knocked out Clermont-Foot, who are doing very well in Ligue 1 this season. Monaco got knocked out by Rodez, and it was one of their old boys that equalised late on, Ayman Abdenour. So a blast from the past for Monaco fans coming back to haunt them. And who else? There was Nice were knocked out as well by another a third division club, Le Puy-en-Velay. Not so much an upset, really, looking at some of the upsets that we have had. But there must be pressure on Lucien Favre as well.
Well, interesting point in that one, Robbie, is that the assistant coach of Le Puy-en-Velay is Florent Balmont, former Nice midfielder, former Lille midfielder as well. Yeah. Started his career at Lyon, didn't make it there, really made his reputation at Nice. But just as you said, to come on to Lucien Favre, pressure. Wow. I mean, that's got to be almost at breaking point, surely now, hasn't it?
There was some talk that we could have Didier Digard taking over the reins in a caretaker role. I mean, I don't know. Should you stick with Lucien Favre if Didier Digard is your other option? I mean, he was a player that once played for Paris Saint-Germain, of course. He was a France youth international, but he's returned to the club. But Nice, I mean, well, we can talk all day about Nice. We spoke a lot about them last week on the podcast as well. But a club that are recruiting off the pitch, recruiting within the structure of the club, but just can't seem to get it right on the club. And this is a third season now of bringing in big names. You can take it back to the previous owners as well, who tried it as well under Chinese ownership of the club before Ineos took over. But they're a club that have had a lot of money thrown at them in recent seasons and are just doing nothing with it. It's got to be frustrating if you're a Nice fan. But we're here to talk about the Cup. There were some big upset results, but there were also some solid results for Ligue 1 clubs. Toulouse got a much-needed 7-1 win over a 4th division side. Lorient got up over a 5th division amateur village side, Le Châtaigneraie, from Vendée, 6-0. Lille were too strong for Australian coach Troyes by 2-0 in an all Ligue 1 clash. Rennes got up over Bordeaux. Interesting watching that one. Bordeaux, who we don't pay too much attention to at the moment, now that they're back in Ligue 2, but still some of their big names there. Ellis is there. Madja still going. He was on the score sheet again, the Englishman, Josh Madja for them. Andy, you had a couple of games. Let's talk about the big guns, Paris Saint-Germain, because a few of them were off watching the basketball in America, of course. But there were enough there that hung around to get the win over Châteauroux, Le Berrichon.
Yeah, it was a great occasion actually, because Châteauroux are quite a famous club in France. I know they're in the 3rd division, but they're a club with a history. They might be struggling now, but they're under Saudi ownership, so that's one interesting strand to it. The same owner as of Sheffield United in English Championship is the owner of Châteauroux. They've got some relatively big-name players for their level as a result. Nolan Roux, for example, who played in the Champions League with Lille not so long ago, who was joking with Christophe Galtier, the PSG coach, before the game, because he played under Galtier at Saint-Etienne for a couple of seasons as well. So one or two well-known players in their team, and a club who were in the final of the Coupe de France against PSG this century, back in 2004. So they've got a bit of history to them. So great crowd at that game, 14,000 sellout, and PSG rocking up without any of the big name front three. You mentioned Kylian, who was off with Ashraf Hakimi in New York watching the NBA. Neymar was left behind in Paris to get some treatment on his ankle. Apparently now he needed treatment on his ankle, which he hurt at the World Cup and not 10 days ago when he was playing against Strasbourg and getting sent off. Lionel Messi wasn't involved because he only returned to training on Wednesday after a couple of weeks off following the World Cup. And Châteauroux were they made it clear they were very disappointed that none of those superstars were involved in the game. They hoped that at least one of them would play, but you can understand from Christophe Galtier's perspective, it's a chance to give some of the so-called fringe players an opportunity. And they got the job done, but they needed a couple of late goals to come through 3-1. With about 15 minutes to go, we were heading towards penalties, and I was beginning to think, well, this would be a monumental upset if PSG were to be knocked out here in a penalty shootout. It's worth saying on PSG in the Cup, I know they are the most powerful team in the land by a long, long way, but their Cup record is still worth doffing your cap to PSG for the fact that they'd won the Cup 6 times in 7 seasons before last year when they were knocked out by Christophe Galtier's Nice on penalties in the last 16. And then, of course, they lost the 2019 final on penalties to Rennes. So they haven't actually lost a game in the Cup in 90 minutes since 2014, which is a pretty remarkable statistic. And they came through this one in the end with the late goals from Carlos Soler and then Juan Bernat in stoppage time. But I think that, I know Christophe Galtier can say, well, we got the job done. That's the most important thing. But Andreas, when I was listening to the podcast on my walk to the stadium on Saturday for the Lens game, I thought he made quite an interesting point about PSG. Andreas Evagor on this podcast last week, saying that they're very lightweight in midfield, and that is an issue which was a problem against Châteauroux on Friday evening, albeit without Marco Verratti playing. But when it comes to the really big games in the next few weeks, and obviously we're thinking about Bayern Munich in the Champions League, the first leg of which is on the 14th of February, so just over a month away, they need to beef up that midfield. And I'm not sure how they're going to do that. You look at the way they've started the season, obviously Verratti is going to play as long as he's not suspended. Vitinha has been very impressive for them since arriving in the summer. On Friday evening, it was Vitinha with a couple of youngsters, Ismail Garbi and Warren Zaire-Emery. Now, they're not going to be playing regularly in the weeks ahead, but that is an issue for PSG very clearly, as is, of course, the fact that they have a lack of options in defence, which was again exposed on Friday. Nordi Mukiele took a bit of a nasty knock early on. It looked like Sergio Ramos was going to be coming on because he was on the bench. You had El Shaddai Bichiabu and Marquinhos in central defence. They haven't really got any other options. Presnel Kimpembe is still a few weeks away from returning from his Achilles problem, which kept him out of the World Cup. So, do they make a move in the January window? A lot of things were exposed in that game, I thought. And yes, they got the result, but it just shows you how much for all they have great talent throughout their squad. Of course, they're very dependent on those 3 attacking players.
Ian, when you look at that squad and you see that when they make changes like that it doesn't just happen, that it's not an easy walk in the park against a third division side. And those youngsters that Andy mentioned are clearly all very talented youngsters. I think Warren Zaire-Emery became the youngest ever starter for PSG in the game. El Shaddai Bichiabu is a man mountain, a very talented defender, mobile and an absolute giant. Garbi's already a Spanish youth international. He'll get to choose his future later. And there are also a host of these young kids, spattered around France and Europe, these young players who have left the club because they didn't get their look in. But surely, and I, when I was there, I saw and heard all these discussions, of like, we're Paris Saint-Germain buy 5 midfielders and yet none of them are any good. We can't, the club looks lightweight and at the back. Surely other clubs around the world would be happy to have, Mukiele, who can cover in the center of defense, Marquinhos, Kimpembe, Sergio Ramos, and then a youngster like Bichiabu coming through. What is it about the pressure at Paris Saint-Germain that when Fabian Ruiz arrives, he suddenly is not any good, that Carlos Soler is suddenly not good enough for Paris Saint-Germain when they arrive with big raps, and it's a recurrent theme. We called it the Doom number 4 shirt for a while. After Milan Bisevac, you had Krychowiak, you had Thilo Kehrer, you had a series of players that had the number 4 shirt, and no matter how good they were when they arrived and the reputation they had, they couldn't make it work. Now Sergio Ramos has been playing with the number 4 shirt so far and making a good deal of it, but there is something that's a recurrent theme that the club just can't buy. There was Ghana Gay who came in as well, who suddenly was, not given the credit, not given the opportunity, or just there's something about when you put on that shirt, you have to be 10 times better.
First point, I can't believe you just put Milan Biševac and Sergio Ramos in the same sentence.
Milan Biševac was the first of the number 4 of the Qatari era.
Right, well, okay. So let's move on.
And a French champion in 2013.
It's quite ridiculous. Okay, I'll take it. It's quite ridiculous, isn't it? Surely. Everybody expects these players to just move seamlessly. Right? Fabian Ruiz, he's obviously a very, very good player. Carlos Soler is obviously a very good player. Okay. These guys are quality players, but they've moved from different leagues, different styles of football. And let's not forget, and I think everybody and many people do, and even us, we do, these guys are human beings. They've moved country. They've moved culture. They've moved maybe not necessarily into a different language, given there's so many Spanish speakers in the dressing room, but they're still, in the rest of their life, they're in France. And it's think about it yourself. If you're sitting out there listening to this and saying, "Oh, these boys are paid so much money, etc., etc." Think about it yourself. Moving job to another country, to a culture you don't know, where you don't necessarily know anybody. I mean, maybe they know 1 or 2 players in the squad, but they don't have any friends. They don't have any family around them. We don't know the personalities of these guys. Maybe they're very close to their families and need them with them as well, and haven't been able to do that. There's a whole set of parameters that go way beyond the football pitch, and I think we do place hugely unrealistic expectations at times on players to immediately adapt. Now, I don't say that they shouldn't adapt within a few months, but I mean, it's been, the start of the season was August. We've had a World Cup in between. Yes, Fabian Ruiz has not been great, but he will be. Yes, maybe at PSG you don't have the time to adapt, but that's because the media builds up this image that, well, they're coming into a great team and they're good players and they should adapt straight away. I don't, and maybe that puts pressure on the club, and maybe the club at times caves into that pressure because the fans read the media. They don't listen to the club who says, or the player who says, "I need just a little bit more time." They see the money, they see the rest of the team, and they think, "Oh, well, these guys, it's just football. They should be able to do it." So I think it's hugely unrealistic expectations for somebody just to come in and just to hit the ground running. Of course, that's what they all want to do. It's not like they're not trying, but sometimes it's somewhat more complicated than that.
Andy, anything to add on what you saw? I mean, there's also Renato Sanchez, who's another one. Pablo Sarabia a little higher up the pitch, but there are players who, should be featuring. The competition for spots should be incredible, and yet there is a clearly defined starting 11 in this side.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the problems. I mean, I was thinking that when Ian was talking, I was thinking if you had a midfield 3 now of, let's say, Danilo Pereira, Marco Verratti and Renato Sanchez, let's just say, that sounds pretty good, doesn't it? And then you've got Vitinha in reserve and Carlos Soler in reserve and so on. Of course, it's great quality. I think one of the issues is that a player like Carlos Soler is the one I keep thinking of because, he's been quite heavily criticised. I think the French media have not been too impressed by Carlos Soler. And as Christophe Galtier keeps saying, because he came in right at the end of the transfer window, he's not had time to adapt to the way the team plays and all the rest of it. He's actually scored a few goals, scored 4 goals, including a very important goal on Friday. But he is a real top-level footballer, as Ian said. He was a very important player for Valencia, playing in La Liga. He's come to a different league where it's physical and all these things that Ian has said. And I think it's also worth saying as well that, as you say, there is a very clearly defined starting 11, which means that the other guys like Soler, like Sarabia, like even Renato Sanchez, they're coming in because maybe, so they're playing when Neymar, Mbappe and Messi are not there for a start. So the team by definition is not as good, and they're expected to raise the level to the same heights, and that's very difficult to do. And if after an hour of a game, Carlos Soler has not had a great game, well, he gets taken off. And I know from my own experience that when you play football and you play maybe half an hour or an hour and then you get taken off, you feel like, well, you've not been able to, and that you need that time to be able to develop your game. And you need to, it's like when anybody starts a job, they have to learn on the job. In a way, a footballer has to learn on the pitch with their teammates. But as Ian says, you do not get the time. And that more globally, that means that you'll get shipped out after a season because in the little time you've had on the field, you've not been able to quite get to the level expected. So I think it's a problem for a player like Carlos Soler. And he's the example I keep coming to. A really, really, really good footballer. But, I'm thinking now, is he going to still be at PSG next season? Which is an absurd thing to be thinking. So, there are lots of issues there. And of course, they are a different team when they have the big boys back. And as you say, in the next round, they're going to be playing against lower league opposition, possibly this Pays de Cassel team from the 6th tier who come up from near Dunkirk, near the Belgian border. It'd be a huge event for them if they were PSG's opponents. So that will be another game in which the big boys will likely be rested because, as I touched on the last time I was on the podcast, Christophe Galtier decided not to rest Kylian Mbappe and Neymar straight away after the World Cup. So the cup games are the chance for them to get the rest, which they really, really need. And at the moment, as long as they're getting through to the later rounds in the cup, then there's no need to panic.
They might have to be rested also because PSG are almost certainly heading to Saudi Arabia for an all-star game against Saudi Arabian League All-Stars on the 19th of January. So it could be just 3 days before the round of 32 cup game. So it'll be interesting to see which squad they take there. Do they take a stronger squad than will play in the round of 32 of the French Cup for an exhibition game in Saudi Arabia?
I did see, and I'm sorry, I don't have any confirmation on this because as a report I saw in the Sports Daily L'Equipe on Friday, they suggested that if PSG get through, which of course they have since done, that cup game in the next round will be played on the Monday in a couple of weeks' time, so that they had a couple of extra days to recover from their trip to Saudi Arabia. And well, I don't really know what to say about that, but anyway, yeah, that's apparently the plan.
Final note on that, it could be Lionel Messi versus Cristiano Ronaldo one more time, though, which is quite an amazing thing to think of. Just 2 weeks after Messi has won the World Cup and Cristiano has signed for the Saudi League, it's like they all knew it was coming. Ian, one more cup game because we're not going to spend all day chatting about the cup, even though there were some fantastic matches. Let's chat about Lyon, though, because they're a side. We've spoken a lot about them in the league this year. They've been up and down, more down than up. Change of coach. Laurent Blanc is really struggling to turn things around there. He's being very upfront about it. He's being very frank and honest in the media, saying, "Look, this is a huge job. This is not one where you can click your fingers and just have an electric shock treatment or suddenly turn things around. This is the problems at this club run deep. We know they've just changed owners, or the ownership." Change of ownership is now in motion at last. But what did you make of their match against Metz, where they managed to get up? And again, it was a side with players rested and young kids coming through.
Exactly. I mean, you pretty much summed it up. Then it was a very up and down performance, and it wasn't particularly convincing. They didn't have a particularly easy tie. It was against Metz, relegated from Ligue 1 last season, pushing from promotion this season. As are Bordeaux, as you mentioned, I mentioned earlier, and Bordeaux doing pretty well, sitting in second. Metz are in sixth, just outside the promotion, the automatic promotion places, of which there's only 2. Remember, because 4 teams go down, 2 come up to cut Ligue 1 to 18 teams next season. But Lyon had a back 4. They had Damien De Silva, who's 34, out of contract, playing at left back. He's a centre back playing at left back. But then they had Sinali Diomande, 21, Castello Luqueba, 20, and Saïl Koumbedi, 17. That was their back 4. They did actually play pretty well. Luqueba having a hand in the own goal that won it for them. Bradley Barcola, he made a first start of the season. A lot of talk about how he wanted to leave and get playing time by joining a club on loan. He's only 20 as well. Got the first goal, his first goal actually, senior goal for Lyon. So aside peppered with youth, you could perhaps forgive them for being a little bit inconsistent, a little bit unsure of themselves. They still had Moussa Dembele up front. Wasn't particularly impressive. in place of Alexandre Lacazette, who wasn't risked until late on due to a bit of a hamstring niggle. But there seems to be so much work at Lyon, and it seems to be the same job. It seems to be the same job that Peter Bosz had. It's the same job that Bruno Genesio had before him, and Salvino, albeit in the 9 games that he had. I mean, how ridiculous was that, to have 9 games and then get fired? For a squad that has been underperforming based on their talent for season upon season upon season upon season. It does seem now that Blanc is, hopefully he gets the backing that he needs, and the backing that he needs seems to be, okay, we're going to trim this squad down. Lots of talk about Romain Faivre leaving, Jeffrey Adelaide. There's probably quite a few others who will leave. Oussem Aouar even being talked about and moving to Roma. And interestingly, Oussem Aouar very close to playing for Algeria now, apparently, after earning a single cap for France in a friendly. Looks now he's going to play for Algeria. There's just so much work for Blanc. He said after the game, there's the attitude to improve, but not only that. I mean, if you're having to improve the attitude of your squad, that says something. And and what it says is probably a 4-letter word, and it's not very good. Because if footballers don't have the right attitude, it doesn't matter how much talent they've got, they're not going to perform. And I think that pretty much sums up how Lyon have been for a number of seasons now, 5, 6 seasons.
Well, they did get the win. They did get through to the next round, but it has been, and you talk about those players that they've brought in, that they've loaned out. They've brought, in the case of Jeffrey and Adelaide, brought him back again after serious injury and a good loan spell with Lens, but unable to really provide any spark. Romain Faivre, another one. Why are they? Is it something to do buying the wrong players that aren't fitting the mold, buying talented players that they think can do the job, Andy, and then just aren't performing? They're misfits.
Yeah. Well, once again, to come back to a point that was made on the last podcast, that saying that, well, it's on the players, not on the coach. Now, you see, fundamentally, I disagree with that, because I think that you can't just say, why do we keep changing the manager? It's all down to the players. Well, no. I mean, footballers are under a manager, and it is the manager's responsibility to get the best out of them, right? Now, there's no doubt that anybody who plays for Lyon is a very, very good footballer. If the manager can't get the best out of them, you have to find somebody else. That's how it works. And beyond that, it is down to the sporting director, the management of the club who buys and signs the players. It is up to them to get the right profile of player. That doesn't just mean you sign a good footballer, because if you're working at Lyon, then you've got to pick a player who's capable of playing at that level. But you also have to pick the right personality. All these things off the field that Ian talked about relating to the guys arriving at PSG, they are very relevant things. What's the guy like in the dressing room? What's his private life like? I remember speaking to Damien Comolli a few years ago before he went to Toulouse in his role as president there, talking about how his approach to signing players. Lots of talk about Damien Comolli, Toulouse, working on using data to sign players, but also just not so much looking at videos of a player, but rather looking, studying their background, their family life, and all these things. Now, these things are all very important, but if you bring the players in, you can't just say, well, it's all down to the players. They have to do better. No, the people who sign the players need to sign different players and need to think about the way they're signing them. And the manager needs to get the best out of the players. Now, clearly, Peter Bosz wasn't doing that. His predecessors were not doing that. Bruno Genesio did a decent job at Lyon, actually. But there are problems that run deep at the club. You can't just say, the players have got to do things better. There are people there whose job it is to bring the players in and get the best out of the players when they're there. Being a manager is a very, 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 very difficult job, not least because they're so scrutinised. Laurent Blanc needs a bit of time and probably does need to change some of the players, but he also needs to get the best out of the players he has. And that means coaching the players. It means it is his job to change the attitude of the players. Do you see what I mean? It's not just about saying the players that have the right attitudes. It's his job to do that. So, these things are all they're all interlinked. But there's no question that Lyon have talented footballers. Ian talks about the defence that played in the cup tie. That's the same defence that played in the league game last weekend against Clermont. It's not like they just brought these guys in for the cup tie. They have a bit of imbalance in the squad. It's also down to the fact that Nicolas Tagliafico had some time off after the World Cup. Malo Gusto's injured. These things can happen to a squad. But, there are problems at Lyon. They are an underperforming team. This is not new. This has been the case at Lyon for 15 years. So the decline at Lyon has been very sad.
In that case, Andy, don't you have to? I mean, yes, you have. For me, in that case, you have to question the players, surely, because they're generally the constant. Yeah, because of course the coach has to get the best out of the players. But I know, but Ian, you can't force the players to change their attitude. They have to also realise they're adults, they're professionals, that they should be performing better. They should be running more. They should be putting in more effort. They should be training harder.
But I'm just what I'm saying is that it's not as simple as saying the players need to be doing better. If you see that as the coach or the sporting director or the president, then you need to bring in the players who will have the right attitudes. I'm essentially agreeing with what you're saying, but I'm just saying that the people who are responsible for that are the coach and the people above the coach. The players are not responsible for that.
I agree with both of you. I think at some point in a well-oiled club, the bucks has to stop somewhere. And ultimately, that's with the owners, if you like, because they're right at the top of the club structure. They're the ones that choose the coach. They're the ones that listen to the coach and say, yes, I need a sporting director. Yes, we need these people. Yes, we need to create this culture, this environment within the club. We need to bring certain players in, all of that. But at some point, the buck has to stop somewhere. And in a well-oiled club, like what Andy is saying, everything is interlinked. And you're going to bring in players and create an environment in which they want to excel, and that, Ian, they want to train harder, like you're saying, that they want to show their best attitude. And all of this, I mean, we're talking about 18-year-old kids who have been told they're great. You need to work on them psychologically, a 24-year-old, a 34-year-old who's just won the World Cup and is coming back now to play, having finally got the last trophy he was missing. Paris Saint-Germain have to be very careful to make sure that they have, and with him, with Messi, it's a mature person, but they have to have the club environment that exists to get the best out of him, knowing that he could come back having just achieved every single thing he wanted to achieve. And now they have to get the best out of him to keep winning. And with Bayern Munich coming up, and ultimately people will say, "Bah, Messi can do whatever he wants now." Like you could say with a 16-year-old kid, he's just a 20-year-old kid. He's just had his own first kid, or he's whatever's happened. He's moved house. He's just been paid €1 million. Ultimately, the buck has to stop somewhere. And this is the big clubs are the ones that manage this the best. They have a solid environment and structure where they anticipate, they look forward, they prepare for certain things, and they create an environment where perhaps the player isn't even aware that they're being managed to excel. Andy.
Yeah, so sorry, just maybe the final word on this. I don't know, maybe move on, but I mean the example is Lens, and Lens, the cup game I was at the weekend, where they were very professional and they won the game because some of their big boys who were rested came off the bench, Seko Fofana, Florian Sotoka. But they are a club who, as we talked about, as again you guys talked about in the last podcast, they're very well run. And they anticipate the departures of players. They did that last summer brilliantly when they lost Kalimuendo and Doucouré and Jonathan Klaus. They signed new players. They had them all signed in time for the return to pre-season training. There was none of this with Carlos Soler coming in on the last day of the transfer window. He needs time to adapt. They had them all in there for the start of pre-season training at the end of June, beginning of July. They were ready to go. And then again in the January window, they signed a new fullback, a new right wing back in November. Julien Le Cardinal, who was playing in the second division and who made his first start at the weekend, and he was very impressive. And he's had that time over the 6-week break to get to know his new teammates. And this is all about management from the top down. Franck S has done a wonderful job, as you've said before. Of course, they lost their sporting director, Florent Gisolfi, to Nice, and it will be interesting to see how that affects the club's recruitment moving forward. But they are an example of a well-run club, and Lyon are an example at the moment of not a very well-run club.
Lyon have the chance to bounce back. They'll have something of a derby match in the next round of the Cup. They are away to Chambéry There are a couple of all Ligue 1 clashes. Bastia's not Ligue 1, but a big club who have been to cup finals before against Lorient. Match of the round is probably Marseille versus Rennes. In the next round, there's Brest versus Lens. Paris Saint-Germain will be up against one of Saint-Anne, Wascahal, or Le Pays de Cassel. So there's still a bit of football to be played before we find out who Paris Saint-Germain will be up against. Toulouse Ajaccio is another one. Lille take on Pau, who were giant killers from the second division as well. So plenty to look forward to. The final of the Coupe de France will be on the 29th of April, 2023. Time for our Deja Who. Now, we've had 2 clues already in this month of January. One was end of December, month of January. They're all linked somehow, so you have to tell us each weekly answer, but then in a couple of weeks' time, tell us the final clue that links all the answers together. So here is today's, and I think this is a good one. It requires a little bit of scratching the head and maybe a bit of research, but it's a good one. Well, we'll see. Well, I won't say any more. Always at risk of giving it away. Here we go. Deja Who. Emerging from one of the world's great youth academies, I was part of the side that wrote the legend of my first ever club and also my national team, for whom I still hold the World Cup scoring record. I won 2 domestic league titles and 2 Champions League trophies before even setting foot in France, where I helped my new team reach another European final. Another move in France saw me crowned Ligue 1 Foreign Player of the Year before claiming my one and only French Championship trophy. During my career, I may have played second fiddle to 2 of the greatest number 10s in history for club and country, but I also caught the eye, and my notoriety enjoyed a resurgence in recent years after a pop song in my honor. Who am I, and who had a hit song about me? So this is mixing a little bit of French popular culture as well. Anyone? It was long. Good player. Good player. All right, getting a couple of shakes of the heads. I've got a great quote from him. Maybe I'll give this to you as well, just for... This is when he arrived in France, okay? So he arrived in France and he wanted to go and see the stadium. And the club owners took him out and took him to the best restaurant in town and wined and dined him and took him to see a few of the sights. And then said, this is what it's like here. He signed. And the next day he woke up and he said, now, please, can I go and see the stadium? And this is what he said. The next day, I finally got to the stadium. What a shock I had. If I'd seen it before, I never would have signed. But I never regretted my decision either. So there you go. That's quite cool. If you know the answer, send us an email to league1podcast@gmail.com. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on all your platforms. You can get involved in the Twitter conversation at League1_English or League1 World. And of course, there's the official website, league1.com, as well, for all your latest Ligue 1 news. Now, I was planning a little bit of a transfer chat, but I think we've pretty much done it now, having talked about 2 big clubs anyway. There are a couple of moves we could still have. There's Ruslan Malinovsky, who looks like he's on his way from Atalanta, the Ukrainian international, to Marseille. Lots of clubs looking to get the services of Azzedine Ounahi from Angers, of course, the Algerian midfield star. We've spoken a bit about the players that could be leaving Lyon. There's talk that someone like Pablo Sarabia could be leaving Paris Saint-Germain as well in the search for playing time. Perhaps quickly, just Andy, a quick word, because I know you're a big fan of Dango Ouattara. Terem Moffi as well at Lorient. Surely these guys are suited to the English game. Certainly Terem Moffi must be suited to a big move across the channels sooner rather than later. We talk about it every year.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, it's a market that the very well-off English clubs are always going to be looking at this time of year. And one of the challenges, especially for a team like Lorient, but actually for pretty much every Ligue 1 club, is to try and fend off that interest in the January window, which is a horrible time of year for just about any club, because if you're looking to sign a player, it's not the ideal time to be buying somebody. And teams who are selling, well, for a club like Lorient, they don't want to be losing their best players now. They can plan. If it's in the summer, of course, they expect to eventually lose Terem Moffi and Dongo Ouattara, who's that bit younger. But they don't want it to happen now. They want it to happen in the summer when they've achieved their objective for the season, when they perhaps got a new signing lined up. So now's not the time. But if the right offer comes in, it's very hard for them to refuse that. And I suppose one thing I would say is that perhaps not the case for Terem Moffi, because he's a later stage in his career. Maybe he could slot straight into an English team, or I don't know, a German team, and make an impact for them in the second half of the season. I'm not sure that Dongo Ouattara, if he were to move now, would be making an immediate impact if he went somewhere else. So I'm not sure what the benefit in the short term would be for him, maybe in the medium term, of course, and certainly in the long term. And for Lorient, in the short term, to lose a player like Dongo Ouattara would be a big blow. I mean, they had that wonderful start to the season. It then fell away quite a bit in the run-up to the World Cup break. And it's looking like they'll probably, sort of revert more to mid-table, which would still be a fantastic outcome for them this season. But they don't want to lose a guy like him now. They want to maybe see what the offers are, see what kind of money they could make for him, and hopefully keep hold of him until at least the end of the season, I would say.
That's it for our Coupe de France chat and a look at what could happen in the transfer market. But we've only got time now to look ahead to Wednesday's matches. So Ligue 1 returns in about 48 hours' time, and then another full round on the weekend as well. We're going to have a quick look at both of them. Ian, to you first, is there anything that's jumping out and catching your eye? I particularly like Nantes Lyon for turning back the clock 20-odd years to when this was champions versus wannabes and future champions, and a big one for the Ligue 1 nostalgic.
It is, isn't it? They're not with the champions, the last champions before Lyon took the 7 league titles, weren't they? And Nantes were, at that stage were real challenges. Were real challenges to Lyon in the early stages of their domination. I think for me, you've got to go to the Allianz Riviera, and it's Nice-Montpellier. It's perhaps not the most attractive fixture in terms of the two sides' form right now. But I think that's a massive one for Nice. That's a massive one for Lucien Favre, assuming he's still in place come Wednesday evening. He may not be if they lose that one. They've actually only lost one. I think it's one of the last 7. Nice. It was the last in the league last time out. Of course, though, the cup it closes off that avenue to Europe, which is a relatively easy avenue. They got to the final last season, hugely disappointed to be beaten by Nantes, and they must look on pretty enviously with Nantes hosting Juventus in the Europa League, and Nice, the Conference League. It's not the same, and that's massive. That is must win for Lucien Favre. Otherwise, surely a change is coming, and very quickly.
Andy, Paris Saint-Germain are at home to Angers at 9 p.m. on Wednesday. Marseille away to Troyes. This is one of those rounds where there's not so much a top-of-the-table blockbuster, but it's more there's a lot to lose for certain clubs in this round. I mean, basically any side in the bottom half of the table is in real danger of being in the relegation fight the whole way.
Yeah, it's certainly from Toulouse down, because they're 12th and they're only 6 points above the bottom 4. Obviously, weekly reminder that 4 teams go down at the end of this season. I mean, Angers going to PSG, they've lost their last 9 league games, which is not the greatest run of form to be in when you head to play. I know they won in the cup, but that was on penalties against Strasbourg. I mean, that game is interesting because, well, will Lionel Messi return? Will Neymar play? Will Kylian Mbappe play? I presume that he probably will. And will Azzedine Ounahi play? Another of the World Cup stars. So that will be an interesting game. And then, so you've got top against bottom, then you've got second bottom against second top with Strasbourg playing Lens, which is also a really interesting game. Strasbourg still just 1 win this season. And I think back to Angus Turrod's pre-season prediction when at the time I nearly spat out my shredded wheat when he said that he thought they were going to finish in the Champions League places, and here we are in coming up to the midway point in the season, and they've had just one win still. So, really big game for them. I mean, I think possibly one of the standout games actually is Lorient against Monaco. We just talked about Lorient before when you asked me about Dongo Ouattara. They've slipped to 6th place. They're just 2 points behind Monaco in 5th. And Monaco, of course, coming off the back of that cup exit, which is a big blow for them because I know you didn't linger on it long, but Monaco have, given that they, I would say, have sought to be the second club in the French game with the money that obviously came in with Dmitry Rybolov left, the Russian owner, and all the ambition they've shown. They were champions in 2017, but they haven't won any other silverware. I know they got to Champions League semi-final. They got to a couple of Coupe de la Ligue finals when that competition was still on the go. They were Coupe de France finalists 2 seasons ago when they lost behind closed doors to PSG. They haven't won any other silverware apart from the league. So going out of the cup is a big blow for them, and they've got to bounce back from that in a situation where they're still very much playing catch up with the teams above them after a slow start to the season.
Playing catch up and doing it quite well are Lens as well, who on Saturday in the second round of the week of Ligue 1 action entertain Auxerre. Now Lens could have found themselves 10 points behind Paris Saint-Germain if they'd lost the game against them last time out. They defeated Paris Saint-Germain, a first loss of the season for Galtier's side, and Lens are just 4 points behind. Now Lens take on Auxerre, Marseille, Lorient, Lyon, Strasbourg, but at the other end, on Sunday night, the final match of the round, Rennes take on PSG. Now that is a big game as well because Rennes may have lost Martin Terrier. I haven't heard the latest on that. Was that the knee's gone for Martin Terrier? So that's a terrible loss for them. But Rennes are a side capable of causing another upset with a history of causing upsets against PSG.
Yeah, absolutely, and a lot of quality in that squad. Andy mentioned the decent job that Bruno Genesio did at Lyon, and he certainly did. He's doing a pretty decent job at Rennes as well, and certainly turned them into one of the more attractive sides to watch in Europe at times. I think Benjamin Bourigeaud's playing really, really well. A goal for him again, and a big performance against Bordeaux in the cup. Yeah, that has historically been a tough fixture for Paris Saint-Germain. I usually don't go along with, what happened 27 years ago is going to affect what happens today. But certainly looking at that one on current form, that history could well continue.
Well, before we look any further to the weekend's matches, we should wait for Wednesday's games to give us a bit more of a form guide. So we'll bring the curtain down on this podcast there. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining me. Andy Scott, it's a pleasure as always.
Pleasure, Robbie. Thanks very much. Enjoy the sunshine.
I will do. Well, I'm off to bed soon, but then I'll be up Tuesday morning for a trip to the beach, perhaps. Who knows? And then Perth versus Brisbane on Tuesday evening for me. There you go, gentlemen. Ian, thank you very much. Enjoy the trip back to Paris.
Pleasure. Will do.
And for all of you at home, keep enjoying, keep listening to Le Beau Jeu, the official Ligue 1 podcast. We'll be back next Monday, as always, to review the weekend's action and look ahead to what's coming. Catch us on Ligue1.com, Ligue1_English, Ligue 1 World, or send us an email and ask us a question or two at Ligue1podcast@gmail.com. From me, Robbie Thompson, and all the team. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
This time maybe Messi's done it!